about that.
It's showtime.
Welcome to the YATCast. This episode is going to be about the founding documents. I'm talking about the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. But not in the same way that most people talk about them. So, before we begin, I'd like to extend many thanks to all my real life and Facebook friends of every stripe: left, right, center, conservative, liberal, because you at many different times have really challenged me to dig deeper. And that's what I'm going to do with the U.S. founding documents. So, let's get started. This is what I'm going to be talking about is more geared towards the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, not so much about the Bill of Rights. I will cover them a little further down the road. Now, every time I read them, I am amazed because of basically how it was written. And as of this particular episode, there's a lot of discussion going on about the different articles and different amendments, most notably impeachment, the Second Amendment, and a bit about the First Amendment. But people tend to miss the real point of what is going on with these documents. Now, to be able to talk about it the way I'm going to talk about it, we're going to need to step back in time. When the documents were written, the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and the Constitution 15 years later, yada yada yada. There wasn't, and even today there isn't, a 100% literacy rate. Although, for being colonies separated from the motherland, so to speak, it was actually quite high. I've seen estimates between around 70 to 80%. Now, when our founding fathers finally decided they'd had enough with King George in England, they wrote the Declaration of Independence. And after the Revolutionary War, our Revolutionary War, they wrote the Constitution. Now, literacy is a person's ability to be able to read and write. It doesn't really measure how well they can do it. Just the fact that they can do both makes them literate. Now, I'm not sure what the 70 to 80% was actually based on, but when the documents were written, they took into account their target audience. I mean, it could have been written, they were learned enough that they could have written in Greek or Latin or any number of other languages. They probably could have even developed their own, but no. Their target audience was everybody. Both literate and illiterate. So what did they do? Through various means leading up to the Declaration of Independence and somewhat after that, they had some discussions, some of them I'm sure were quite heated, about what to do. And they would have been able to, and they probably did express their thoughts in a much more learned way. But when they actually set it down on paper, they wanted everybody to be able to understand it. No highfalutin $2 words. That's a reference to university and colleges. So in order to do that, they wrote it in the vernacular of the day. The literate would have been able to understand it just by reading it. The illiterate was a different story. Not being able to read, they would not be able to grasp high concepts. I'm sure some of them could, but they wouldn't be able to read it for themselves. So the second thing they were shooting for when they wrote it was that if somebody read it to somebody who couldn't read, be they not so smart, be they blind, whatever, they wrote it in such a way that when it was read to somebody who could not read, they would understand it. And this concept seems to be missed by a lot of people. Oh, well, you got to have a constitutional scholar to understand that. Horseshit! You don't need a constitutional scholar to understand it. You don't need to be a constitutional scholar to be able to say, yeah, okay, that is constitutional and that is not. It's not rocket science. It's very plain, simple language that has held up for 240 years. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against people learning. But the only thing that about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, which seems to be ignored these days, but it in itself is probably the single most important document, aside from the act that was written that led up to the Declaration of Independence. And I may or may not cover it in another episode. But sometimes people need to feel important. It's a good thing to learn, whether it be by books or by experience or just by feeling things out. Now, when you get into things like the Federalist Papers, which were actually a discussion, and really they are not part of the founding of this country. Yeah, it was a discussion That's it. Just like the Silence Do-Good letters. Yeah, I know you're thinking, oh, national treasure, national treasure. Well, guess what? The Silence Do-Good letters do exist. Chew on that for a minute. But the whole point is that you don't have to be a constitutional scholar. And in an upcoming episode, I will go over some things that will explain exactly what was meant by some of the more argued parts of it. Now, there's another founding document that doesn't get a lot of airplay. Seemingly, it may not seem all that important. However, it was very, very important to how our Constitution was structured. And like I said, I'll cover that in another episode. So thank you for spending some time with me, and we'll see you at the next YATCast. Are you enjoying the YATCast? Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/YATCast. That's https://www.patreon.com/YATCast.